When my brother stole the house, my parents left me and gave it to his greedy in-laws. Everyone thought I was finished, but they had no idea what I had planned. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. My name is Michael Harrison, and this is the story of how I lost everything I held dear, only to discover that sometimes the greatest betrayals lead to the most profound victories. It's a story about family, greed, justice, and the price we pay when we choose money over love. But most importantly, it's about learning that true revenge isn't about destruction, it's about redemption. The villa that started it all sits on 3 acres of pristine lakefront property in the hills overlooking Pine Valley. My parents, Thomas and Margaret Harrison, bought it in 1985 when they were young and full of dreams. Dad was a small-town contractor who worked 18-hour days to build his business from nothing. And Mum was a school teacher who spent her evenings tutoring struggling kids for free. They weren't rich, but they understood the value of hard work and the importance of leaving something meaningful behind. I can still remember the day they brought my younger brother David to see the property for the first time. I was 12, David was 8, and we ran through those empty rooms like wild animals, our voices echoing off the bare walls as we claimed bedrooms and planned adventures. The house was a disaster then, paint peeling, floors warped, windows cracked, but Mum and Dad saw potential where others saw problems. "Boys," Dad said as we stood on the back porch looking out at the lake, "this is going to be our family's legacy. Someday when your mother and I are gone, this place will remind you of who you are and where you came from. Promise me you'll always take care of it." I promised without hesitation. David nodded too. Though he was more interested in the tire swing Dad was already planning to hang from the old oak tree by the water. For the next 23 years, that house was the center of our universe. Every holiday, every birthday, every major family milestone happened within those walls. Dad and I spent countless weekends fixing things, replacing the roof, refinishing the hardwood floors, building the deck that wrapped around the entire house. Mom turned the gardens into something that belonged in magazines, with roses climbing the trellises and vegetable patches that fed half the neighborhood. David was different from me, even as a kid. Where I found satisfaction in working with my hands and building things that would last, David was always looking for shortcuts. He was charming and funny, the kind of person who could talk his way out of trouble and into opportunities, but he never seemed to understand the value of actual work. While I spent my summers helping Dad with construction jobs, David spent his playing video games or hanging out at the mall. "That boy's got champagne tastes on a beer budget," Dad used to say with a mixture of affection and exasperation. Someday he's going to have to learn that nothing worthwhile comes easy. But somehow David always seemed to land on his feet. He was popular in school, dated the prettiest girls, and talked his way into a business degree at the state university. After graduation, he moved to the city and got a job in sales where his natural charm served him well. He made decent money, drove a leased BMW, and lived in a trendy apartment downtown. I took a different path. I followed Dad into the construction business, eventually taking over when his arthritis got too bad for him to swing a hammer. I never made the kind of money David did, but I had something he didn't, the respect that comes from building things that matter, from creating homes where families would make memories for generations. The first crack in our family foundation appeared when David met Madison. I'll never forget the Christmas when he brought her home for the first time. She walked into our cozy, lived-in house like she was touring a museum of quaint poverty. Everything about her screamed expensive. The designer clothes, the perfect manicured nails, the way she held her wine glass like she was posing for a photograph. But it was the look in her eyes that bothered me most. She was calculating, measuring, appraising everything she saw like a real estate agent working out commission rates. "Your parents have such interesting taste," she said to me during dinner, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "This house has so much character." Mom beamed, missing the insult entirely. "Oh, thank you, dear. Thomas and I have put our hearts into this place. Every room has a story." "I'm sure it does," Madison replied, glancing around with barely concealed disdain. After dinner, I overheard her talking to David on the back porch. "Honey, this place could be worth a fortune if it were fixed up properly," she was saying. "The location is incredible, but the decorating is so outdated. With the right renovation budget, this could be a showcase property." "It's my parents' house," David replied, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Of course, baby. I'm just saying someday when it's time, this place has incredible potential." That conversation haunted me for years. Madison wasn't seeing our family home. She was seeing dollar signs. Things got worse after they got married. Madison came from money, old money, the kind of family that had been wealthy for so many generations, they'd forgotten what it felt like to want for anything. Her parents, Charles and Vivian Blackwood, owned half the commercial real estate in the county. They looked at David like he was a charity case their daughter had taken pity on, and they looked at the rest of us like we were barely worth acknowledging. The Blackwoods made their disapproval of our family clear from the beginning. At David and Madison's wedding, they seated us at the back even though we were the groom's family. When they gave their toast, they talked about how proud they were that Madison had found someone with potential, and how they looked forward to helping David elevate his circumstances. I watched my parents shrink into themselves that night, suddenly conscious of their thrift store formal wear and uncertain table manners. It broke my heart to see them made to feel small in their own son's wedding celebration. After the wedding, David began to change. His visits home became less frequent, and when he did come, he seemed uncomfortable, as if he were embarrassed by where he came from. He'd make comments about the house needing updates, about how Mom and Dad should consider downsizing, about how the property would be worth so much more if it were properly developed. "David, this isn't just a house," I told him, during one particularly frustrating visit. "This is where we grew up. This is where Mom and Dad put their whole lives." "I know that," he said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm just saying they should consider their options. They're not getting any younger, and maintaining a place this size is a lot of work." I could hear Madison's voice in his words, and it made me sick. The end came sooner than any of us expected. Dad had a massive heart attack on a Tuesday morning in March. He was 68 years old and had been working in the garage, building birdhouses to donate to the local elementary school. Mom found him there an hour later, looking peaceful, like he'd just decided to take a nap surrounded by the wood shavings and tools he loved. Mom didn't last 6 months without him. She'd always said they were two halves of the same whole, and losing Dad left her hollow and lost. She tried to stay strong for David and me, but I could see her fading a little more each day. She died in her sleep on a quiet September evening, and I like to think she went peacefully, knowing she'd be with Dad again. The funeral was small but beautiful. Half the town showed up to pay their respects because Mom and Dad had touched so many lives over the years. Former students, employees, neighbors, church members, they all came to say goodbye to two people who had made the world a little brighter just by being in it. The reading of the will took place a week later in the offices of Jameson and Associates, the law firm that had handled my parents' affairs for decades. I expected it to be straightforward. David and I would inherit everything equally, the way it had always been in our family. I was wrong. According to the last will of Thomas and Margaret Harrison, old Mr. Jameson read in his careful, precise voice, we leave our entire estate, including the family home and all property, to our eldest son, Michael Harrison, with the understanding that he will preserve the legacy we have built and care for the values we have tried to instill. The silence in that room was deafening. I stared at Mr. Jameson in shock, unable to process what I'd just heard. David's face had gone completely white. "There must be some mistake," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Jameson shook his head. "No mistake, son. Your parents were very clear about their intentions. Michael, they've left you a letter explaining their reasoning." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope that contained my parents' final words to me. The letter was in Mom's careful handwriting, but I could hear both their voices in every line. "Dear Michael, if you're reading this, then your father and I are gone, and you're probably wondering why we made this choice. The truth is, over the past few years, we've watched David change in ways that worry us. We love him deeply, but we fear he's lost sight of the values we tried to teach both of you. Madison and her family have filled his head with ideas about money and status that go against everything we believe in. We're leaving everything to you because we trust you to preserve what we've built. Not just the house, but the legacy of love and hard work and community service that has always defined our family. We know this decision may cause pain, but we believe it's the right thing to do. Please take care of your brother." He's going to need guidance to find his way back to the man we raised him to be. And please take care of our home. It holds so many precious memories, and we want those memories to live on. With all our love, Mom and Dad." I looked up from the letter to find David staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't just hurt or disappointment. It was something darker, more calculating. "This isn't fair," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I'm their son too. I deserve half of everything they worked for." "David," I said gently, "I never expected this either." "We can work something out. Work something out." He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "My parents just disinherited me, and you want to work something out." "They didn't disinherit you," I protested. They left me nothing, Michael, nothing. Do you know what that feels like? Do you know what Madison's parents are going to say when they find out?" And there it was, the real source of his pain. He wasn't heartbroken about losing our parents' legacy. He was terrified of being embarrassed in front of the Blackwoods. I tried to talk to him over the following weeks, tried to explain that I wanted to share everything with him, that the house would always be his home too. But David had shut me out completely. He wouldn't return my calls, wouldn't answer my texts, and wouldn't even acknowledge me when I showed up at his apartment. Madison was even worse. The few times I managed to catch them together, she looked at me with undisguised hatred, like I had personally stolen something from her. Which in her mind I probably had. She'd been counting on inheriting that lakefront property, and now her meal ticket had vanished. I moved into the family home and tried to honor my parents' wishes. I kept Mum's gardens, maintained Dad's workshop, and preserved every detail that made the house special. But it felt hollow without family to share it with. I'd gained a fortune in property and lost my brother in the process. 3 months after the will reading, I got a call that changed everything. "Mr. Harrison, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Pine Valley Police Department. I'm calling to inform you that there's been a break-in at your property on Lakeshore Drive. We need you to come down and assess what's been taken." I raced to the house, my heart pounding with fear and anger. Who would break into my family home? What could they possibly want that was worth violating the sanctuary my parents had created? When I arrived, I found Detective Martinez waiting on the front porch with a grim expression. The front door was standing open, and I could see the chaos inside even from the driveway. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison," she said as I approached. "It looks like they were specifically targeting documents and paperwork. Your father's office has been completely ransacked. I walked through the house in a daze, taking inventory of the damage. The thieves had been thorough but selective. They'd ignored the electronics, the jewelry, the artwork that had real monetary value. Instead, they'd focused on Dad's filing cabinets, Mom's desk, anywhere important papers might be stored. Did they take the safe?" I asked, suddenly remembering the small fireproof safe where my parents kept their most important documents. Detective Martinez nodded grimly. "Cut right through the wall to get to it. These weren't amateur burglars, Mr. Harrison. They knew exactly what they were looking for. A cold certainty was settling in my stomach, but I pushed it away. I couldn't believe what I was thinking. I wouldn't believe it. 2 weeks later, I got another call, this time from Mr. Jameson. "Michael, I'm afraid we have a problem. Someone has filed a challenge to your parents' will, claiming they have evidence that the document we probated was not the most recent version." "What kind of evidence?" "A will dated 6 months after the one we have on file, in which your parents leave everything equally to both you and David. The signatures appear authentic, and they claim to have supporting documentation proving their validity." I sat down heavily in Dad's old recliner, the pieces finally clicking into place. "Let me guess. David is the one filing the challenge." "Actually, no. The challenge is being filed by Madison's father, Charles Blackwood, on behalf of his son-in-law. He's hired some very expensive lawyers, Michael. This is going to be a fight." That night I sat in the house my parents had loved, surrounded by the memories we'd created together, and I finally understood what I was really facing. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about the systematic destruction of everything my parents had worked for, orchestrated by people who saw our family legacy as nothing more than assets to be liquidated. The legal battle consumed the next 8 months of my life. The Blackwoods had hired a team of lawyers who specialized in will contests, and they attacked my parents' final wishes from every possible angle. They claimed Dad was suffering from early-stage dementia when he signed the will. They brought in handwriting experts to question the authenticity of the signatures. They even tried to argue that I had exerted undue influence over my parents in their final years. But their ace in the hole was that forged will, the one that had supposedly been created after the one Mr. Jameson had on file. The document was a masterpiece of deception: aged paper, ink that matched the pen Dad always used, signatures that fooled two different expert analysts. Someone had put a lot of time and money into creating a convincing fake. The worst part was watching David during the proceedings. He sat in that courtroom day after day, listening to lawyers tear apart our parents' memories and reputation, and he never once looked uncomfortable. He'd convinced himself that he was the victim here, that I had somehow cheated him out of his rightful inheritance. Your Honor, Charles Blackwood's lead attorney argued during closing statements, the evidence clearly shows that Thomas and Margaret Harrison intended to treat both their sons equally. The will that Mr. Michael Harrison is attempting to probate represents either a forgery or the confused ramblings of a man whose mental faculties were already compromised by the illness that would eventually kill him. I wanted to stand up and scream. I wanted to tell that courtroom full of strangers about the man who had taught me how to use tools, who had worked 16-hour days to build something lasting, who had been sharp as a tack right up until the moment his heart stopped beating. But all I could do was sit there and watch as they tried to destroy his reputation to get their hands on his property. The judge's ruling came on a Friday afternoon in November. I'll never forget sitting in that courtroom. My hands clenched so tight my knuckles had gone white, waiting to hear whether my parents' final wishes would be honored or overturned by people who had never known them, never loved them, never understood what they were really trying to protect. After careful consideration of all the evidence presented, Judge Morrison said, her voice echoing in the suddenly silent courtroom, I find that the will dated March 15th, submitted by Mr. Charles Blackwood on behalf of David Harrison, is authentic and represents the true final wishes of the deceased. The previous will is hereby declared null and void, and the estate of Thomas and Margaret Harrison will be divided equally between their surviving sons, Michael and David Harrison. The gavel came down like a gunshot, and just like that, everything my parents had worked for was split in half and handed over to people who would never understand its true value. But the Blackwoods weren't finished with me yet. Within a week of the judge's ruling, I received a formal offer to purchase my half of the property from David and Madison. The price was fair, technically speaking, but the message was clear. They wanted me gone completely. They didn't want to share ownership of the house with someone who might interfere with their plans for it. When I refused to sell, things got nasty quickly. Madison's father used his connections to make my life difficult in ways both subtle and obvious. Construction permits for my business became harder to get approved. Clients started canceling contracts without explanation. The bank suddenly decided to call in a loan that had never been a problem before. The pressure campaign culminated 3 months after the court ruling, when I came home from a particularly frustrating day to find David and Madison waiting in the driveway with a moving truck and a team of workers. What's going on? I asked, though I already knew the answer would break my heart. We're moving in, David said without looking at me. This is our house now too, and we've decided we want to live here. Both of us live here? In the same house? Madison stepped forward, her smile sharp as a knife. Actually, Michael, we've been thinking. This house is really too big for all of us to share comfortably. David and I have decided we'd like to buy out your half and make this our primary residence. I already told you I'm not selling. Well, that's unfortunate, she continued, because we've also decided that if we're going to be co-owners of this property, we should make some updates to better reflect current market values, starting with the interior design. I watched in horror as her workers began carrying furniture out of the house, Mum's antique rocking chair, Dad's favorite reading lamp, the kitchen table where we'd eaten thousands of meals together. You can't do this, I said, my voice shaking with rage. Those aren't just furnishings. Those are family heirlooms. Actually, we can, Madison replied coolly. As 50% owners, we have the right to make decisions about the property, and we've decided this place needs a complete renovation to reach its full potential. Over the following weeks, I watched helplessly as they systematically destroyed everything that made the house special. Mum's flower gardens were torn up and replaced with low-maintenance landscaping. Dad's workshop was converted into a wine cellar. The cozy, lived-in feeling that had made the house a home was stripped away and replaced with the kind of sterile luxury that belonged in a magazine spread. But the worst was yet to come. 2 months into their renovation, Madison announced that her parents would be moving into the house as well. Apparently, Charles and Vivian Blackwood had decided to downsize from their mansion and wanted to live closer to their daughter and grandchildren. Grandchildren? I asked, confused. Madison's smile was radiant with triumph. Oh, didn't David tell you? We're expecting! The baby is due in the spring. And just like that, I understood the final piece of their plan. It wasn't enough to steal the house. They were going to fill it with their own family, creating a new generation that would have no connection to the people who had originally built this place with love and sacrifice. I was being erased from my own family's legacy, one decision at a time. The Blackwoods moved in the following month, and suddenly I was a stranger in my own home. They treated me like an unwelcome tenant, making it clear that my presence was tolerated but not wanted. Charles would make snide comments about my blue-collar background and suggest that I might be more comfortable in a smaller place. Vivian would rearrange the common areas to suit her taste, then act surprised when I objected to finding my father's favorite chair stored in the garage. But it was the little things that hurt the most. The way they'd go silent when I walked into a room. The way they'd make plans for family gatherings without including me. The way they'd talk about their house and their property as if I had never existed. David had become a stranger to me. The brother I'd grown up with, the boy who used to help me catch fireflies in these same woods, had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize. He'd learned to speak their language of entitlement and condescension, and he wielded it against me with surgical precision. You know, Michael, he said during one particularly painful dinner, maybe it's time you thought about moving on. Starting fresh somewhere new. This house holds so many painful memories for all of us. Painful memories, I repeated, unable to believe what I was hearing. Well, yes, Mom and Dad's deaths, the legal battle, all the tension between us. Maybe it would be healthier for everyone if we could just start over. I looked around the dining room table at these people who had invaded my family's sanctuary, and I realized something that changed everything. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me, that I would slink away quietly and let them enjoy their stolen victory in peace. They had no idea who they were dealing with. That night, alone in the bedroom that had been mine since childhood, I made a decision that would change the course of all our lives. I wasn't going to roll over and accept this. I wasn't going to let them destroy my parents' legacy without a fight. I was going to take back what was mine, but I was going to do it the right way, with intelligence, patience, and a plan they would never see coming. The first call I made was to my oldest friend, Marcus Chen, who had become a successful attorney specializing in property law after we graduated high school together. Marcus had been at my parents' funeral, had seen how much the house meant to me, and had been quietly outraged by everything that had happened since. Michael, I've been waiting for you to call, he said when I reached him. What they did to you in that courtroom was criminal. That will was a fake, and we both know it. Can you prove it? Not in court, not with the evidence we have now. But there might be another way. Tell me, when did you say the break-in happened? I told him about the burglary, about how the thieves had specifically targeted documents and paperwork, and the safe was taken, cut right out of the wall. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Michael, I think they needed something from that safe, something that would have exposed the fake will for what it was. Do you have any idea what your parents might have kept in there? I thought back to all the times I'd watched Dad open that safe, usually to retrieve important papers or documents. Birth certificates, marriage license, insurance papers, and copies of their wills. Copies? Dad always kept backup copies of everything important. He was paranoid about fires or theft. Did anyone else know about those backup copies? I felt a chill run down my spine as the implications sank in. David knew. We both knew Dad's habits. Michael, I think your brother and his in-laws arranged that break-in to destroy any evidence that would have exposed their fake will. They needed to make sure the original copies couldn't surface during the court proceedings. It all made sense now. The timing of the break-in, the specific targeting of documents, the professional way it had been carried out. David had given them inside information about the house's layout and where Dad kept his important papers. My own brother had arranged to burglarize our family home. What can we do about it? I asked. Legally? Nothing, unless we can prove they were involved in the break-in, which would be nearly impossible at this point. But Michael, there might be another angle we can work. Tell me about the property itself, the deed, the ownership structure, the legal status. For the next 2 hours, Marcus walked me through every detail of the property's legal history. What we discovered was a weakness in the Blackwoods' seemingly perfect plan, a loophole they hadn't considered because they'd been so focused on the will that they'd ignored the underlying property. Rights, the original deed is in both your parents' names, Marcus explained, but there's a covenant attached that restricts how the property can be used. It was designated as a single-family residence when your parents bought it, with specific restrictions on commercial development and multi-family occupancy. What does that mean? It means that having Charles and Vivian Blackwood living there permanently might actually be a violation of the deed restrictions. And if we can prove that David and Madison are violating the covenant, we might be able to force a sale of the entire property. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was a start. For the first time since the court ruling, I felt a flicker of hope. Over the next few weeks, Marcus and I worked quietly to build our case. We documented the Blackwoods' permanent residence in the house, gathered evidence of the covenant violations, and prepared our legal strategy. But I wasn't content to rely solely on legal maneuvering. If the Blackwoods wanted to play dirty, I was going to show them just how creative I could get. The second part of my plan was more unconventional. During my years in construction, I'd learned a lot about home automation and security systems. I knew how to wire houses for sound and lighting, how to install remote-controlled devices, how to make technology work in ways most people never imagined. And I still had my keys to the family house. Late at night, while the Blackwoods were sleeping peacefully in beds they had no right to occupy, I began making modifications to the house's electrical and audio systems. Nothing dangerous or illegal, just creative applications of legitimate technology that would make their stolen paradise a little less comfortable. I started small. Motion sensors connected to speakers hidden in the walls, programmed to play subtle sounds at random intervals, footsteps in empty rooms, doors creaking, whispers that could barely be heard. Smart switches that would turn lights on and off according to patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully orchestrated to create an atmosphere of unease. The beauty of modern technology is that everything can be controlled remotely through smartphone apps. I could be miles away and still know exactly what was happening in every room of the house, still trigger events that would make the Blackwoods question their own senses. It didn't take long for the effects to become apparent. Did you hear that noise last night? I heard Vivian asking Madison during breakfast one morning when I happened to be getting coffee from the kitchen. What noise? Madison replied, though she looked tired and stressed. Footsteps in the attic. Like someone was walking around up there for hours. Charles laughed dismissively. Old houses make noise, Vivian. The wood settles, pipes expand and contract. It's perfectly normal. But over the following weeks, the perfectly normal sounds began to wear on them. The random lights are turning on and off. The whispers that seemed to come from inside the walls. The sensation that they were being watched even when they were alone. Madison started looking over her shoulder constantly. Charles began checking and rechecking the locks every night. Vivian stopped going into certain rooms altogether, claiming they gave her bad feelings. And David. David started drinking more, sleeping less, jumping at every unexpected sound. The guilt was eating him alive, and the mysterious disturbances in the house were amplifying his psychological stress in exactly the way I had hoped. The turning point came during a dinner party they threw for Madison's business associates. The Blackwoods had invited a dozen of their wealthiest friends to show off their new home, to demonstrate just how successfully they had elevated their family's social status. I watched from the shadows as their guests arrived in luxury cars, dressed in expensive clothes, ready to be impressed by the Blackwood family's latest acquisition. Madison played the gracious hostess, giving tours of the renovated rooms and explaining her design choices. Charles held court on the back deck, pointing out property values and investment potential. They had no idea I was controlling every light switch, every audio device, every piece of technology in the house from my smartphone. The fun began during cocktail hour. The lights in the living room started flickering, just slightly at first, then more dramatically. When Charles went to check the electrical panel, the kitchen lights began strobing in a pattern that spelled out "Get out" in Morse code. Not that any of the guests would recognize Morse code, but the rhythmic, deliberate nature of the flashing was unmistakably intentional. "Having some electrical problems?" one of the guests asked with obvious amusement. "Just a minor issue," Madison said quickly, though her face had gone pale. "Old houses, you know." But the electrical problems were just the beginning. As the evening progressed, the hidden speakers began playing sounds at frequencies just barely audible to human ears. Whispers, footsteps, the sound of doors slamming in empty rooms. The guests started looking uncomfortable, glancing around nervously, making excuses about early meetings and long drives home. The climax came during dinner, when I activated every device simultaneously. The lights strobed in chaotic patterns, while ghostly voices seemed to echo from the walls themselves. The sound of a child crying, Tyler's voice, which I had sampled from old home videos, filled the dining room at a volume that made conversation impossible. The guests fled. Within 15 minutes, that dinner party had dissolved into chaos, with Madison's business associates practically running to their cars to escape whatever supernatural forces had apparently taken up residence in the Blackwood family's dream home. "What the hell is happening in this house?" Charles shouted over the cacophony, his usual composure completely shattered. I let the disturbances continue for another few minutes, then gradually restored everything to normal. The lights stabilized, the sounds faded, and the house returned to its usual quiet state, leaving behind a family of terrified, confused people who no longer felt safe in their stolen sanctuary. That was when I made my entrance. I walked through the front door like I belonged there, which, legally, I still did, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing my most innocent expression. "Sorry, I'm late for dinner," I said cheerfully, looking around at the abandoned dining room and the obviously shaken family. "Did I miss something?" The look on David's face was worth everything I had endured over the past year. He stared at me with a mixture of suspicion, fear, and desperate hope that I might have some explanation for what had just happened. "Michael," he said, his voice shaking, "did you see anything strange outside?" "Hear anything unusual?" I pretended to consider the question seriously. "No, everything seemed normal to me. Why?" Madison burst into tears. Over the following days, I gradually escalated the psychological pressure. The mysterious disturbances became more frequent, more targeted, more personal. The lights would turn off whenever Charles walked into a room. Whispers would follow Vivian through the hallways. Madison started finding her personal belongings move to different locations, always accompanied by the faint sound of a child's laughter. But it was David who broke first. I found him in Dad's old workshop, now the wine cellar, at 3 in the morning, sitting on the floor with his head in his hands, surrounded by empty bottles. "I can't take this anymore," he said without looking up at me. "This house is haunted, Michael. Mom and Dad are angry about what we did, and they're making us pay for it." "What did you do, David?" He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes full of guilt and desperation. "You know what we did." "You've always known. Tell me anyway." "We forged the will. Madison's father hired experts to create a fake document that would override Mom and Dad's real wishes. We broke into the house and stole the safe to destroy any evidence that could expose us. We lied to a judge, perverted the course of justice, and stole your inheritance." The confession hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. My brother had finally admitted what I had known all along, that he had betrayed our family, dishonored our parents' memory, and destroyed the legacy they had tried so hard to preserve. "Why?" I asked. "Because Madison's father made it sound so reasonable," David said, his voice breaking. "He said Mom and Dad were being unfair, that they were playing favorites, that we deserved equal treatment. He said we weren't really stealing anything, just correcting an injustice. And you believed him?" I wanted to believe him. I was so angry about being cut out of the will, so embarrassed about what Madison's family would think. It was easier to convince myself that we were the victims than to face the truth about why Mom and Dad made the choice they did. I sat down across from my brother, looking at this broken man who had once been my best friend. my partner in childhood adventures, my closest confidant. The David I had grown up with was still in there somewhere, buried under years of entitlement and manipulation, but he was still my brother. "What do you want to do about it?" I asked. "I don't know. I can't undo what we've done. I can't bring Mum and Dad back and apologize. I can't give you back the year of hell we put you through. No, you can't, but you can do the right thing now." David looked at me with desperate hope. "How? How can I possibly make this right?" "Tell the truth publicly. Admit what you did and help me restore Mum and Dad's real will. Madison will leave me. Her family will disown me. I could go to prison for fraud and forgery. Maybe. Or maybe facing the consequences of your choices is the first step toward becoming the man our parents raised you to be." We sat in silence for a long time, both of us thinking about the choices that had brought us to this moment. Finally, David nodded. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll tell the truth." The next morning, David called a press conference. Standing on the front steps of the house our parents had built, with reporters and cameras recording every word, my brother told the world about the conspiracy he had participated in. He admitted to the forged will, the orchestrated break-in, the year-long campaign to steal our family's legacy. He named names, provided documentation, and accepted full responsibility for his role in the fraud. "I let greed and embarrassment cloud my judgment," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I allowed my in-laws to convince me that my parents were being unfair, that I deserved something that was never mine to take. I participated in forging legal documents, orchestrated a break-in at my family home, and lied to a court of law. I have dishonored my parents' memory and betrayed the brother who loved me unconditionally." The media frenzy that followed was unlike anything our small town had ever seen. Within hours, the story had gone viral. Wealthy family caught in inheritance fraud. Son confesses to stealing from his own brother. Mysterious hauntings drive criminals to confession. The headlines wrote themselves. Madison's family tried desperately to distance themselves from the scandal. Charles Blackwood issued a statement claiming he had been misled by David about the legitimacy of the will, that he had acted in good faith based on information provided by his son-in-law. His lawyers immediately filed motions to withdraw from any legal proceedings and threatened to sue David for fraud and misrepresentation. But it was too late. The truth was out, and the evidence David provided was overwhelming. Bank records showing payments to forgers, communication logs between Charles and the criminals who had broken into our house, and even security footage from a storage facility where they had hidden Dad's stolen safe. Within a week, Charles and Vivian Blackwood were facing criminal charges for conspiracy, fraud, and theft. Their real estate empire began crumbling as clients and business partners fled from the scandal. The family that had once looked down on us with such disdain was now front-page news for all the wrong reasons. Madison filed for divorce 2 days after David's press conference, taking their unborn child and moving back in with her parents while they still had a house to live in. She never spoke to David again, never even said goodbye. In the end, she was exactly what my parents had seen her to be. Someone who valued money and status above love and loyalty. The legal restoration of our parents' true will was swift once. David's confession provided the evidence needed to overturn the fraudulent document. Judge Morrison, the same judge who had originally ruled against me, personally apologized for the miscarriage of justice and expedited the proceedings to restore my full inheritance. But by then, I had already decided what I was going to do with it. The house felt different now that the Blackwoods were gone. The sterile luxury they had imposed was still there, but underneath it, I could sense the bones of the home my parents had created. The love they had poured into these walls hadn't been destroyed. It had just been temporarily obscured by people who couldn't recognize its value. David came to me 3 days before his sentencing hearing, looking older and more worn than I had ever seen him. The year of legal battles and public humiliation had aged him beyond his 34 years. His hair was going grey at the temples, lines of stress carved deep around his eyes, his shoulders permanently hunched with the weight of shame. "Michael, I need to say something before they send me away," he said as we sat on the back porch where we had played as children, where Mum had served us countless meals, where Dad had taught us to whittle and fish and dream. "I'm listening," I said. "I'm sorry. I know those words are inadequate for what I did to you, to our family, to Mom and Dad's memory. I know saying sorry doesn't give you back the year of hell I put you through, doesn't undo the damage to our relationship, doesn't restore the trust I destroyed." He paused, staring out at the lake where we had learned to swim, where we had built forts on the shore, where we had promised each other we would always be brothers no matter what life threw at us. "But I need you to know that the David who participated in that fraud, who let Madison's family poison his mind against his own blood, who chose money over family, that wasn't the real me. That was a weak, cowardly, selfish version of myself that I'm ashamed to have become, Akos." "Then who is the real you?" I asked. "The real me is the brother who used to catch fireflies with you in these woods. The real me is the boy who cried when you left for college because I was going to miss you too much. The real me is the man who knows that our parents raised us to value character over cash, love over luxury, family over everything else in the world." Tears were streaming down his face now, and I felt my own eyes filling up despite everything he had put me through. I found him again, Michael. That real version of myself. It took losing everything. My wife, my reputation, my freedom, your trust. But I finally remembered who I was supposed to be. And that man would rather spend 10 years in prison than live one more day with the knowledge that he betrayed the people who loved him most. I looked at my brother, this broken man who had once been my best friend, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years, genuine remorse. Not regret about getting caught, not self-pity about the consequences he was facing, but true sorrow for the pain he had caused. "Do you remember what Dad used to say about mistakes?" I asked. David smiled through his tears. "Everyone makes them, but only good men learn from them. Do you think you've learned from yours?" "I've learned that family is the only thing that really matters. I've learned that integrity can't be bought or sold or traded away for social status. I've learned that our parents were right about everything they tried to teach us. Even when I was too proud and stupid to listen, we sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the lake, both of us remembering better times when our biggest worry was whether Mom would make us come inside before we finished our game of hide-and-seek. "David," I said finally, "I forgive you." He looked at me with such surprise and gratitude that it broke my heart all over again. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," I continued. "It doesn't mean pretending this never happened or going back to the way things were before. You're going to have to live with the consequences of your choices, and I'm going to have to learn to trust you again slowly, if at all." "I understand," he said. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm grateful for it anyway." "You're my brother," I said simply. "Nothing you do will ever change that, even if you sometimes forget what it means." David was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for his role in the fraud. Charles Blackwood got 7 years, and the forgers and burglars he had hired received sentences ranging from 2 to 5 years each. The judge made it clear that crimes against family, violations of trust between blood relatives, were particularly heinous and deserving of serious consequences. I visited David once a month during his incarceration, bringing him books and news from the outside world, slowly rebuilding the relationship that his choices had nearly destroyed. Prison was hard on him, but it was also transformative. He spent his time earning his GED, learning a trade, and working with a counselor to understand how he had allowed himself to be manipulated by people who saw him as a means to achieve. And I keep thinking about what Mom and Dad would say if they could see me now, he told me during one visit, gesturing to the concrete walls and steel bars that surrounded us. "What do you think they would say?" "Dad would say that falling isn't the end of the world as long as you get back up. Mom would say that she was disappointed in my choices, but she still loved the boy she raised, even if he had lost his way for a while." "I think you're right," I agreed. "What are you going to do with the house?" he asked. "Are you going to live there?" That was the question I had been wrestling with for months. The house was mine now, free and clear, restored to its rightful owner by the courts, and cleansed of the toxic presence that had briefly infected it. I could live there, start a family there, pass it down to my own children someday, just as my parents had intended. But every time I walked through those rooms, I saw the damage that had been done. Not the physical renovations, those could be undone, but the spiritual damage. The way greed and betrayal had poisoned a place that was supposed to represent love and security and family unity. I had a better idea. "I'm going to give it away," I told David. "What?" I'm going to convert it into a group home for children who have aged out of the foster care system. Kids who need a place to stay while they get on their feet, learn job skills, and figure out how to be adults without any family support. David stared at me like I had lost my mind. Michael, that house is worth over $2 million. You could live there for the rest of your life or sell it and never have to work again. Money isn't everything, David. Mum and Dad taught us that, remember? They built that house to be a place where family could grow and love could flourish. The best way to honor their memory isn't to hoard what they left me. It's to use it to help other people build the families they never had. I could see the wheels turning in David's head as he processed what I was telling him. You're going to give away your inheritance to help strangers. I'm going to transform our parents' legacy into something that would make them proud. They spent their whole lives helping people. Dad with his construction work, Mom with her teaching and tutoring. This is just a bigger version of what they were always doing. What will you call it? The Thomas and Margaret Harrison Home for Young Adults. A place where kids who have been thrown away by the system can learn what it means to be part of a real family. David was quiet for a long time, absorbing the magnitude of what I was planning. Finally, he looked up at me with something like awe in his eyes. You're a better man than I am. Michael. No, I'm just a man who learned from better parents than either of us deserved. The conversion took 8 months to complete. I worked with architects and contractors to transform the house into a proper group home, while preserving as much of its original character as possible. Mum's kitchen became the heart of a new kind of family, where young adults who had never known stability could learn to cook and share meals. Dad's workshop became a training center where they could learn job skills and trades. The gardens were replanted with vegetables and flowers that the residents could tend together, learning the satisfaction that comes from nurturing something beautiful and watching it grow. The living room where David and I had played as children became a common area where new kinds of siblings could bond over video games and homework and dreams of better futures. On opening day, I stood in the driveway with the first group of residents, 8 young adults between the ages of 18 and 21, all of them products of a foster care system that had failed them in one way or another. They looked at the house with the same wonder and hope that David and I had felt the first time our parents brought us here all those years ago. This is your home now, I told them. Not temporarily, not conditionally, but really and truly yours. The only rules are that you treat each other with respect, contribute to the household in whatever way you can, and remember that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who choose to love you no matter what. Marcus, the oldest of the group, raised his hand tentatively. What if we mess up? What if we make mistakes? I smiled, thinking about all the mistakes David and I had made over the years, all the ways we had disappointed and hurt each other, and the forgiveness that had eventually brought us back together. Then you learn from them and try to do better tomorrow. That's what family does. We forgive each other, help each other grow, and never give up on each other, no matter how badly we screw up. That was 3 years ago. The Harrison home now houses 12 residents and has a waiting list of young adults who are desperate for the stability and support it provides. We've had our share of problems, conflicts between residents, struggles with addiction, setbacks, and disappointments that come with trying to help people who have been hurt by life in profound ways. But we've also had successes that would have made my parents beam with pride. Marcus graduated from community college and is now studying to become a social worker. Sarah, a former foster child who arrived with nothing but trauma and anger, is getting married next month to a young man she met in our job training program. James, who aged out of the system at 18 with no skills and no support, now manages our landscaping program and has helped create the most beautiful gardens the house has ever seen. David was released from prison 6 months ago. He lives in a small apartment downtown and works in construction for a company that specializes in affordable housing. We have dinner together once a week, slowly rebuilding the brotherhood that his choices had nearly destroyed. He volunteers at the Harrison home on weekends, teaching the residents carpentry skills and sharing his story about the consequences of choosing money over family. Do you ever regret it? He asked me recently as we worked together to build a new deck for the house. Giving up all that money, all that property? You could have been set for life. I looked around at the young adults who called this place home, at the vegetable garden where they were learning to grow their own food, at the workshop, where they were discovering the satisfaction of building things with their hands. I thought about my parents and how they had always found their greatest joy not in accumulating wealth, but in sharing what they had with people who needed it most. Never, I said. This is what Mom and Dad would have wanted. Not a monument to their memory, but a living legacy that keeps on giving back to the world. They would be proud of you. They would be proud of both of us, I corrected. You made a terrible mistake, but you found the courage to make it right. That takes the kind of character they tried to teach us. We worked in comfortable silence after that. Two brothers who had learned the hard way that family is about more than shared DNA. It's about shared values, mutual forgiveness, and the choice to love each other despite our flaws and failures. As the sun set over the lake that evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Mom had always loved, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. The house was alive again with the sound of young voices and laughter. The gardens were flourishing under caring hands. The legacy my parents had built was growing and spreading in ways they never could have imagined. I had lost my inheritance and gained something infinitely more valuable, the knowledge that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the lives we touch, the love we share, and the difference we make in the world. David's betrayal had nearly destroyed our family, but in the end, it had taught us both what family really means. Not perfect people who never make mistakes, but flawed human beings who choose to forgive each other, learn from their failures, and work together to build something beautiful out of the broken pieces of their lives. The Harrison home stands today as a testament to the power of redemption, the strength of forgiveness, and the truth that love really can triumph over greed if we dare to choose it. My parents' legacy lives on, not in bank accounts or real estate portfolios, but in the young adults who have found hope and healing within these walls. Their dream of building something lasting and meaningful has been fulfilled in ways they never could have anticipated. And sometimes, late at night when the house has settled into peaceful quiet, I swear I can feel them watching over us all, Mom and Dad proud of what their sacrifice has become, grateful that their sons finally learned the lessons they had tried so hard to teach us about what really matters in life. The betrayal that nearly destroyed us ultimately saved us, teaching us that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's the strongest thing any of us can choose, and that sometimes the most profound victories come not from holding on to what we think we deserve, but from giving it away to people who need it more. So I ask you now, as you've listened to my story of betrayal, revenge, and redemption, if your own brother betrayed you, stole from you, nearly destroyed everything you held dear, would you choose justice or mercy? Would you seek revenge or redemption? Would you hold on to your anger, or would you find the courage to forgive? Because in the end, that choice, between bitterness and forgiveness, between revenge and redemption, that choice defines not just what kind of family member you are, but what kind of person you choose to be.